26 in Africa takes us to Rwanda. So similar, it's almost like Burundi's twin. Geography. Rwanda is located just east of Lake Kivu. Two ranges ring the eastern edge of the Albertine Rift, Congo-Nile Ridge and the Virunga Mountains. Mount Karisimbi is the country's highest point, a dormant volcano nearly 15,000 feet, 4,500 meters high. Across the mountains are highlands carved into hills and valleys by rivers and streams. The eastern Kagera Valley is pocked with numerous lakes. Like much of tropical Africa, Rwanda experiences a fairly long wet season, September to May, a short dry season, June to August. Lower elevations are warm all year round, but the slopes of the mountains are temperate, while the tip of Karisimbi is tundra. Like Burundi, the western valleys and mountains are covered in montane forest, but for the highest elevations of the Virungas, which instead open up into strange and wonderful alpine moorlands. Eastwards, the vegetation becomes a mosaic of forested riverbanks and open savanna. Rwanda's rocky history has wreaked havoc on the country's wildlife. In recent years, though, they've recovered, including a large population of gorillas and the reintroduction of rhinos, both black and white. Batwa. Rwanda probably has been inhabited ever since the first humans arose. By the end of the Ice Age, the forests were occupied by people of the Central African pygmy type, while likely the eastern savannas hosted people of the East African bushman type. Across the divide, these two clades of men mingled, comprising what later comers called the Batwa. Bantu. But you all know what comes next. The Bantu race from somewhere around Cameroon finally makes their way across the Albertine Rift by the dawn of the Christian era. The Bantu had a lot going for them: farming and ironworking. A more stable food source, bigger populations, iron tools and weapons, and a martial culture meant there was little the Batwa could do. Pushed into the mountain forests, the Batwa of the Great Lakes settled into providing the Bantu with wild game and skins, while the Bantu offered their tools and foodstuffs. As the first millennium wears on, the Bantu of Rwanda become part of the northern Lacustrian people, inhabiting a fertile arc east of Lake Tanganyika clockwise to the east shore of Lake Victoria. Those in the western highlands become the western branch, neighboring the West Nyanza. By the Middle Ages, the westerners west of Lake Kivu and the Ruzizi River become the Forest Kivu, to be groups like the Shi and Tembo, while those east become the Highland Kivu. Kingdom of Rwanda. About this time, a West Nyanza people, the Rutara, organized into an empire known as Kitara. In Uganda, we'll expound upon them, but the presence of a dynamic imperial state just to the north probably spooked a lot of Kivu chieftains, who began expanding their own power. By the mid-15th century, two rival kingdoms had arisen. Karagwe, along Lake Victoria, was a Rutara realm, while Little Rwanda along Lake Kivu was of the Highlanders. Based at Nyanza, the first king or Mwami of Rwanda, Gihanga I, ruled the country between Kivu and the Kanyara River, a fair bit smaller than today. The name Rwanda in the Kinyarwanda language originates from Kuanda, meaning something like expansion or spreading. Already the realm had her eye on the prize. Besides Rwanda, by the mid-16th century, other highlanders found the kingdoms of Gisaka between the Nyabarongo and Kagera rivers, and Bugesera north of the Ruvubu. As late as 1680, Burundi joins the fun south of the Ruvubu. These four all speak dialects of a larger language called Kinyarwanda or Kirundi, depending on the country. And besides that, they possessed the Tutsi-Hutu social structure. Despite everyone speaking the same language, Rwanda and the others were divided into three ethnic groups. First, the Batwa, who made their living as hunters and gatherers in the wild. Second were the Hutu, who seem to have been the original Bantu farmers. The Tutsi, as from Burundi, were newcomers who arrived in the region after the Hutu. Where or when is hard to say. Centuries of intermarriage with Hutu have hidden a distinct Tutsi genome from studies. Our best guess is the Horn of Africa or the Sudan. What is certain is the Tutsi brought with them a pastoral lifestyle based around cattle. So let's put a pin in this. We'll come back. The warrior caste, the nobles, and the king were all part of the Tutsi ethnicity, being the top dogs in Rwanda. As time passed, the Rwandan kings brought more lands into cultivation, subjugated local chiefs, and centralized the realm. Like much of feudal Europe, Tutsi power was a product of their ownership of large estates for crops and cattle. The Tutsi dominance was reinforced, and kings allowed them to abuse Hutu, whom they were meant to protect. Any Hutu revolts were swiftly and severely punished. However, social mobility was not unknown. Loss or gain of cattle could move you between the classes, though this was fairly rare. It was King Mutara II who allied with Burundi and brought about the downfall of Bugesera, divided between the victors roughly along lakes Rweru and Kyohoa. Mutara also conquered Gisaka after a period of weakness, making Rwanda a regional power in the Great Lakes. The 1885 Berlin Conference gave Germany right to the lands east and south of the Great Lakes. Being so far inland, Rwanda was largely unknown and figured little into the affairs of both Europeans and Zanzibaris. But the promise of riches and glory accelerated the scramble for Africa, and nations rushed to claim their own slice of the continent. The Germans and British signed a treaty in 1890 to delineate their spheres in East Africa. From Lake Victoria, Germany got the land south of the 1st degree south latitude, and Britain the land north. West, the Congo Free State claimed a line from the head of Lake Tanganyika north-northeast, intersecting with the Anglo-German line. This theoretically divided Rwanda between Britain, Germany, and the Free State. But King Kigeli IV was savvy and acquired guns from German traders and prohibited foreigners from entering his land. Sadly, 1895, the king took ill and died, plunging Rwanda into a succession crisis. Mibambwe IV was set upon by palace intrigues, while the Congo Free State invaded in 1896 for their stake. Rwanda was thrashed, and Mibambwe's faction was defeated by his stepmother's Bega faction. The king committed suicide, and the pro-German Bega took power, placing the young Yuhi V on the throne. Just in time for the Germans under Governor Count von Goetzen to expand inland. Already Burundi accepted German protection, and Rwanda did the same in 1897, becoming part of German East Africa. In practice, the Germans allowed the royal government to continue ruling the country in their stead. Germany was impressed with Rwanda's disciplined army and efficient administration, earning the moniker the Prussia of Africa. With German rule, however, came Christian missionaries, largely Catholic, and demands of cash taxes. The hope was Rwandans would adopt a market economy driven by cash crops. And now let's bring back up the Tutsi-Hutu matter. Late 19th century Europeans were a curious sort, exploring and publishing maps and books about the new lands and peoples they encountered. But they all contextualized it in a very Eurocentric lens. The achievements of European civilization had long convinced Europeans that they were the best humanity had to offer, not just in terms of technology or culture, but also biology. Racialist and indeed racist ideas proliferated amongst anthropologists. The white man was seen as the pinnacle of evolution, the end point on the great chain of being. This was reinforced by pseudosciences like phrenology, which attempted to explain intelligence as the product of different skull shapes. Neuroscience, psychology, genetic theory, and study of human evolution were all in their infancy. Categorizing mankind into races based on skin color, head shape, even temperament became commonplace. It was modern science. Naturally, the guys who came up with the scheme, Europeans, placed themselves at the top, while peoples they admired, like civilized Muslims and Asians, got to be a rung below. At the bottom were savage folk like Africans, the Negro, the most like our primate ancestors. But the picture gets complicated with the Hamitic hypothesis. The white race was subdivided into different subraces. It varied depending on the author. One scheme, based on the sons of Noah from the Bible, went like this. Japheth was the father of Europeans, Shem that of West Asians, and Ham North Africans, all branches of the white or Caucasian race. Science has moved on. Only Semitic has survived. But the Hamitic people were supposed to have begotten cultures like Egyptians. When Europeans studied places like Ethiopia, they were confronted with peoples who, while dark-skinned and African, possessed stereotypically white features like long noses and high heads. And when they found ruins of places like Great Zimbabwe, rather than accept they were built by locals, assumed they must have been built by white men who ruled over the Negroes of Africa. The Hamites of North Africa founded East African civilizations and produced a mixed ruling elite. And for these theorists, the Tutsi provided some compelling evidence. The Tutsi struck Europeans as European light, tall, slender, with white facial features and more noble demeanors. Of course they ruled over the Black Hutus, as Europeans ought to rule them. Now, let's get our ducks in a row. Intelligence and personality are the result of a complex interplay of genetics, upbringing, and culture, not geographic origin. Every population has smart people, and not so smart people, but that's not a biological issue. Many of these racial theories have been discredited and mocked and hated for the strife and violence they've led to. That being said, modern genetic studies do indicate Ethiopians and Somalians and Swahili possess Western Eurasian DNA, even the Kwekwe, as we've mentioned. While ancient migrations have created a so called race of half white, half black people in the Horn of Africa, this is a pretty modern way of looking at it. I don't think it's correct to see it as white men coming to Africa and bringing civilization, but rather people from one place moving to another and creating a new culture with the natives. Remember, modern Swahili, genetically mostly African Bantu, do not see their civilization as foreign, but as their own, the product of centuries of cultural interchange with the Islamic and Indic worlds. Oh boy, that was a lot to take in. Well, the Germans might have poked around with the Tutsi Hutu theories, but their presence was short lived. 1910, the borders with both Belgian Congo and British Uganda were adjusted. With Congo, it was shifted west to the Ruzizi River, and with Uganda, it was brought south to the Kagera River, up to the Muvumba River, thence across to some ridges east of Lake Burera, north along another ridge, thence west to the Virunga Mountains, across Mount Karisimbi, then southwest to Lake Kivu as the northern Congo border. World War I, Belgium and Britain occupied German East Africa, and at the Peace of Versailles 1919, Belgium got Rwanda and Burundi, effective 1922, as the League of Nations mandate territory of Rwanda-Urundi. With British Tanganyika, Rwanda's borders follow the Kagera River up to the Nyabarongo River until the Burundi portion. Rwanda-Urundi. Under Belgian rule, new crops like maize and cassavas were introduced to improve food supply, and also cash crops so the colony wasn't such a money pit. Plantations are worked by forced laborers as a form of taxation. Very unpopular, and many fled to Uganda to avoid it. The Belgians also became fascinated with the Hamitic hypothesis, and formally divided Hutus and Tutsis by cattle ownership and appearance. If you were deemed to have light enough skin, a big enough head, and tall enough height, the Belgians considered you Tutsi, and afforded you special treatment in the rule of Rwanda-Urundi. 1931, everyone was issued an identification card. In fact, part of the differences in appearance might be explained by the Tutsis' diet of dairy and beef. Good for the bones, good for the kids. King Yuhi V shaved under Belgian rule. Them meddling in his kingdom's affairs, a major famine in 1928, and his refusal to convert to Catholicism eventually led to his deposition by Belgian authorities, replaced by his son, Mutara III, who did convert. To give the Belgians credit, they did try to help during another famine in 1943, though food demands by the war undermined this relief, leading to the deaths of perhaps 50,000 people. 1946, the League of Nations mandate system was replaced with the United Nations trust system, and Resolution 1514 demanded all colonies be given the opportunity of independence. Mutara III, a modern king in a modern world, had democratic plans for Rwanda, and abolished the labor tax and tried land redistribution. Tutsis, of course, didn't like this, and ethnic tensions rose. What's more, when the elections did come, Hutus gained power, threatening the Tutsis. African nationalism rose in the 1950s, led by Tanzania's Julius Nyerere and Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah. With a socialist bent, many leaders saw local African elites as willing accomplices in the oppression of Africa. People like the Tutsis were traitors who sold their own people out for European colonialism. Coupled with their wealth and power, the Tutsis became the bad guy for many Hutus. The Hutu Emancipation Movement Party was formed on behalf of the Hutu majority, and the Tutsi responded with the Rwandese National Union. And then, in 1959, good King Mutara III died suddenly of a brain hemorrhage. Many Tutsi believed he had been assassinated. Meanwhile, his half-brother Kigeli V's succession upset Hutus and even the Belgians. But Kigeli certainly looked a king. My man was over 7 feet tall, and tried to position himself as the father of all Rwandans. But the situation was beyond repair. Hutu politician Dominique Umboni Umutwa was beaten by Tutsi militants after church, sparking revenge killings of many tens of thousands of Tutsi. The king responded by cracking down on the Hutu, and the Belgians were in no position to stop anything. Several 100,000 Tutsi fled to Uganda, Tanzania, and Burundi, causing issues there, if you remember. King Kigeli joined them in 1960, and in the meantime the Hutu nationalists seized control of the country. Hutu leader Gregoire Kayibanda officially declared the end of the monarchy the 28th of January 1961, ushering in the Republic of Rwanda. Repubblica yu Rwanda. Republic of Rwanda. Anxious to just be done with the whole thing, Belgium left Congo in 1960, and in 1961 renamed their territory to Rwanda Burundi and split them in two. Along the Ruha River, the border went south along the foothills of the Congo Nile Ridge, east to the Kanyara River, up Lake Yohoa and across to Lake Reru, and thence along the Nyabarongo River. Both Rwanda and Burundi became independent July 1st, 1962. Kayibanda became president, his capital at Kigali. Militias of Tutsi exiles raided Rwanda in the 60s, leading to Hutu military response. Relations between Rwanda and still Tutsi-dominated Burundi fell apart. The Kayibanda regime tried to correct the mistakes of the past and established quotas on Tutsis in education and administration. The identification cards continued, and Hutus were discouraged from fraternizing with the Tutsis. 1965, Rwanda became a one-party state to maintain the Hutu ascendancy. Breakdown of relations between Kayibanda and the army led to his overthrow in 1973, General Juvenal Habyarimana taking charge. Initially, he tried to ease the restrictions on Tutsi, but pushback made him reverse course. A 1978 constitution made Habyarimana virtual dictator. With the end of the Cold War, however, he decided democracy wasn't so bad in 1990. Meanwhile, during the 80s in Uganda, a civil war had raged. Tutsi militias chose the winning side, who supported attacks on Rwanda by the Rwandan Patriotic Front. 1990, the RPF invaded on the grounds of undemocratic government and Tutsi refugees. The Rwandan Civil War raged for 3 years, the government aided by both Mobutu's Zaire and Francois Mitterrand's France. 1993, the Arusha Accords tried to create a balanced Hutu-Tutsi government, but the peace fell apart when President Habyarimana's plane was shot down by an unknown actor in 1994, killing him and President Intari Amira of Burundi, sparking civil war in that country. In Rwanda, hardline Hutus responded to their president's death with a final solution to exterminate the Tutsis once and for all. The government and military encouraged all patriotic Hutus to do what must be done on both Tutsis and Hutus deemed too soft. Death squads went from village to village, murdering all who opposed them and torching the settlement. Victims were often raped before being slaughtered, hacked apart with machetes, gunned down, or burned alive in their homes. Not even hiding in schools or churches saved them. The RFP responded with their own war crimes, and war resumed. The Hutu government soon fell apart, and the RFP seized control of the country. RFP leader Paul Kagame formed a national government as vice president. Hutu Pasteur Bizimungu his president, but Kagame held the reins. The Rwandan Civil War and genocide claimed 500,000, a million lives. It's hard to say for sure. Even the Batwa were not spared. Controversy exists over the international community's lack of intervention. Should they have intervened? Well, they didn't. Most passionate observers lay the fault on the Belgians, with their racist theories, dividing Rwanda into Tutsis and Hutus as part of their strategy to divide and rule. Again, the Belgians didn't make up this divide, though they did reinforce it. The Belgians, the Germans, the monarchy, they share blame, as well as those who actually committed the genocide. But this misses the point. The Tutsi-Hutu divide demonstrates how anger, frustration, and revenge can enable people to dehumanize their enemies and justify the murder of hundreds of thousands in the hope that a better Rwanda would be left. Utopia is a dangerous thing. How many lives are worth it? The killing continued as Hutu militias were hiding out in Zaire. Rwandan operations against them helped kick off the First and Second Congo Wars, leading to millions more dead by its end in 2003. 2000, Bizimungu became more trouble than he was worth. Kagame sacked him and assumed the presidency himself. Kagame still remains in power, winning every election since. Authoritarian and harsh, Kagame, though, seems to run a clean house. Corruption in Rwanda is third lowest in Africa. His government has prioritized infrastructure, hoping to transition to a service-based economy. Compared to Burundi, Rwanda has experienced rapid growth in industry, mining, finance, tourism, and standard of living. But Rwanda is still a little firecracker, able to punch way above its weight class. The ongoing Kivu conflict in Congo-Kinshasa has seen the Rwandan military allegedly support or even operate with rebels in the country. That Congo is unable to stop them speaks to both Congo's situation and Rwanda's strength. Still, Rwanda is playing with fire, and many fear the conflict will explode into a larger war. Again. Wow, Rwanda was heavy, wasn't it? Next time, we'll go north to Uganda. See you there.